Hi everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Chao Deng from Hashkey Capital, a Hong Kong-based VC investor in the blockchain space. It's my great pleasure to have Soravis, founder of Bandit Protocol, to join this section and hear his thoughts on Bandit Protocol and the role of Oracle in the DeFi space. So first thing first, Soravis, could you talk a little bit about yourself and Bandit Protocol? What are you guys working on, your goals and vision in the near term, and what's your long-term goal in down the road?
Sure. Well, that's a lot to unpack. Hi guys. Soravis here, CEO of Bandit Protocol, and thank you SCB, for hosting this. Where do I start? I guess quick introduction about myself. The CEO of Band.
Okay, I think we're back to track.
All right, I guess we're back. All right, no worries. Centralized technology has problems. Anyways, as I was saying, we founded Bandit Protocol around 2017, along with my two other co-founders from MIT, to solve an Oracle problem, right? And what an Oracle problem is, I guess in simple form, right? It's a limitation of the blockchain system, right? The fact that any decentralized application cannot retrieve data outside of its own blockchain, right? Or push the data out to the external system. And that essentially make it a closed system, right? Pretty much like a computer without an internet or connectivity. And that sort of, severely limit a lot of the potential and usefulness of the application being built on top, right? And that's why when we founded Bandit Protocol, we want to solve this problem, right? By being able to provide real-time, real-world data to a lot of these decentralized applications and smart contracts. And our goal is really simple, right? We want to provide the most reliable, scalable, and decentralized data infrastructure for any application across different blockchain, right? So that they can leverage and build without having to worry about, the real world data. And that make it much more useful, right? And I guess fast forward from 2017 to 2021, we are seeing a lot more use cases, and again, all of the in DeFi, right? And hence, this conference and a lot of people are start talking about real use cases, and almost every single application will revolve around Oracle, right? What else in terms of the development, right? Direction, I guess so far, we have found 3 years in, right? 4 years in, we have found quite a really good product market fit. We have now over 100 partners. Including global validators, data providers, and of course the end users, right? Decentralized application across over 10 different blockchain, and now we have over $7 billion locked in smart contract that utilize our data Oracle right now to secure them.
Sure. Thanks for the background introduction. Talking about applications, before going into that, I'd like to ask about the question opportunities for you guys. We noticed that Bandit Protocol has gone for some more questions. You started with Cosmos, and now in Ethereum, Polygon, Polkadot, etc. What is the consideration behind this move, and what are some other chains that you and your team are considering in the future?
Right. So I think we believe in the multi-chain world since 2017, right? And fortunately, it kind of played out to our thesis so far. we have seen more vibrant ecosystem and usages in non-Ethereum chain, right? Including BSC, Cosmos, Terra, Polkadot, Solana, Phantoms, and more, right? And I think from the beginning, we used to be on Ethereum, actually, for those that actually follow us since, the founding. We were on Ethereum, and we do believe that for us to stay relevant and gain usages, we need to be able to provide more accurate data and the frequency that is high enough to meet the requirement of this different chain, right? And of course, when we were on Ethereum, it was much costly, and it wasn't be able to update as frequent as what other chain would require us to. And that's why we started to pivot away from Ethereum as the main chain and use Cosmos as the, think of it as the main hub to secure the data, process the data before supplying them to other blockchain, right? Now, in terms of I guess what blockchain we want to support, I don't think we have any judgment or any particular plan for any particular blockchain. We try to support all that have usages, right? And that including also all the layer 2 and sidechain on Ethereum as well. So we will work on Ethereum as well as on Optimisms, on XDAI, on Arbitrums, Polygon, as well as other chain as we see more usages across them.
The more chains you onboard, I think you have to face the issue of scalability of your solution, both in terms of TPS and question communications. We know that Band Protocol is aimed to be a scalable Oracle technology. So what do you think? What makes Band Protocol easily scalable? Given that Ethereum 2.0 is coming on the way, does the current iteration have enough bandwidth to match the upcoming Ethereum upgrades? And if there are any limiting factors, what would that be?
Right. So I think there are two parts to that, right? The first part about our own, scalability, right? As I mentioned, we rely on our own dedicated blockchain, right, based on Cosmos. That sort of leverage the proof of stake consensus algorithms, and this allows us to scale much faster than proof of work blockchain, right? And at the same time, since most of the transaction that happen on, we call it band chain, for the lack of a better word, all the transactions that happen on band chain are basically tied to our Oracle request, right? Or, sending the band tokens. There's nothing much other than that involved. There's no lending products, there's no DEX trading on that. And that's why, with our current capacity, we are able to process a much more, concentrated number of requests compared to basically if you're on Ethereum, right? Because even if Ethereum is, scaled to 100,000, TPS, you're still going to see all this, 1,000 or 10,000 other applications that, compete for the same block space, right? And that's really different for us because we built our own to be really, purpose focused, and therefore other application will never clock our network, right? So that means, in terms of scalabilities, we are actually quite sufficient even now. And the foreseeable future, right? And this is partly why projects like us, Terra, also rely on the same Cosmos infrastructure, right? So that's the first part. I think we are in a pretty good position. And then the second part is if you follow Oracle and the use case right now, we do not actually need to provide, let's say, sub-second update, right? Or even every second update, right? For most use cases, the frequency is much less, right? You use it for liquidation, you use it to say mint or redeem some tokens, synthetic tokens, and those use cases require much less update frequency. We don't really see the need for the sub-second update at the moment. So I think at this point, there's probably enough bandwidth to satisfy any foreseeable use cases for sure.
Thanks. We know that there are quite a few players in the Oracle space. We have mentioned some names like Link and a few others. How do you see the competitive landscape in the Oracle space, and how would you see your place in the Oracle space?
Sure. I think let me begin with saying competition is healthy. I think it's good. Like I said, Oracle is a big problem for our industry, right? And I think the more solution, the better for the industry. As I think everyone inevitably will have to make trade-off, right? Between decentralization and speed, between decentralization and accuracies, things like that. Always going to be a fundamental trade-off. And I think many projects choose. Again, different trade-off for this solution. I see, of course, Chainlink is a good first mover with a lot of domination on Ethereum, right? And that's also the reason why we sort of pivot away from Ethereum as well to handle other different blockchain, and that's good because we also find our own niche, right? If you follow us, we have been supplying a lot of data to the Terra ecosystem, right, including Mirror, Anchor, and many upcoming more as well. That's really catered to our niche. And again, I think as you see the project evolving, many more take different approach. API 3 sort of take the DAO approach to begin with, right? You see the Pi network, which try to work with a lot of the data providers as a first source. Again, all of this I think have different trade-off. I don't think anyone particularly threaten one another. I don't believe in a one size fit all, right, for everyone. And I think as you see a lot of this application evolving to have a lot of more values locked with them, you will see that a lot of them will choose to use many different oracles to sort of safeguard their solution, and that makes sense, right? You don't want to have a single point of failure and also depend on one single project that you cannot control, right? And that's why you see this multiple oracle solution being implemented in many different DeFi projects right now on different blockchain.
A follow-up question on computation. We know the Band Protocol team started from Thailand in Asia. What do you see as a team started from Asia? What do you see your unique edge or your unique competitiveness in the entire blockchain space? I know the question is quite general, but I would like to curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Right. I think it's a good question. I think, there's a lot of dichotomy between the East and the West, right? And people don't, sometimes people don't really see what's going on the other side of the world, right? And I think, I guess the main advantage here, I think two things is that one, we are able to observe the market more closely, right? And that's why you see us working with, I guess, more Asian projects like Terra, before it was famous, right? Basically, when we work with Terra, nobody really mentioned it on crypto Twitter, and now it's all over, right? And so that allows us to gain that advantage by working, first with them, right? Phantom, for example, the same thing, right? And more than that, right? I think being in Asia, I think the main benefit is it allows us to scale the team faster. Because of better regulation, in Thailand we are actually quite more inclusive than the US, right? We're able to move faster. We're able to hire more people due to just cheaper cost structure here, allow us to have a good runway. And so I think there are certainly benefits, and of course there are drawbacks, right? I mean, we have less, I guess, personal relationship with the Western projects. And also that's because of 2 years COVID right now that we can't travel. But I mean, the online conference and online meeting is good, but it's never going to replace that personal relationship, right? Yeah. So, there's pro and con in that.
Sure. I echo that the COVID has some negative impact on face-to-face communication and offline events participation. So next, I would like to hear your thoughts on the decentralization of Oracle data sources. If memory is correct, you talked about this before, saying that the data sources needs to be more decentralized in the DeFi space. To be more specific, like the multiple Oracle solutions are needed for blockchain transaction to be like a truly trustless. So do you see the DeFi space has been moving towards a more decentralized Oracle data sources Do you see that trend, or it is still like in discussion among the community?
Right. I think, I think that the short answer is yes, right? I think as blockchain enter mainstream recently, right? I think a lot more traditional enterprises, including the traditional data providers, are really warming up to the blockchain industry, right? And in fact, many of them, are quite keen to explore, as they, of course, they want to stay relevant, right, in the emerging industry. So that's why you start to see firms like Jump Capital also much more involved with Pi, and we're seeing this trend, for many other firms as well globally, right? And I think you also see big players like Google, in particular, Google Cloud, right? That sort of work with us to connect our data for usages outside of blockchain as well. So, we are actually actively exploring many different use cases with some of these partners. Not only we reach out to them, they also reach out to us. So I think that's actually quite encouraging sign that we have seen. And this actually is something that we couldn't have predicted, I would say 6 or 12 months ago, right? I mean, the fact that we are talking in a SCB DeFi conference right now, right? That's the position of the CeFi and DeFi here, right? It's amazing, right? And I think over the next 6 to 12 months, we are going to see many more involvement from these traditional players coming in, and I think it's really welcoming. I mean, a lot of these DeFi application that we work with, Oracle is a B2B business. We need to gain trust from them, and with the help of these, onboarding, more traditional data providers, that's been really helpful so far.
Also, a follow-up question on this, because you talk about institutional involvements. We see more and more to B side or institutional participants. I understand that they might have like a higher standards for data sources and even for data outputs. How do you see like the Oracle outputs in terms of data accuracy, volume, etc.? Is it already mature enough, or have already met the standards of the institutional requirements? Have we reached the bars for institutions to get in, or are we still have some we need to go a little bit further to meet their requirements?
I think in terms of the technical wise, I don't think there's much difference, to be honest. Again, and that's partly also because the current usages for Oracle is mostly the input, right? The data from these data providers to the blockchain, right? And then, as I mentioned, we don't really need sub-second update, and so a lot of the current technology actually work fine. I think what is actually challenging is actually more on the regulation or the operation of these traditional enterprises, right? I mean, one easy example is they are used to dealing with an entity, right? Say you want to use Bloomberg data, right? You would basically buy the license, and you cannot allow other people to use it, right? You need to use it exclusively for yourself. Now, if you move that from single entities consuming that data to let's say, hey, Band Protocol going to feed that data to blockchain applications, right? And the data going to be on Band chain. What's going to happen? Because any public entities on public blockchain can actually look at the data and use that data, right? What does that mean in terms of licensing? What does that mean in terms of usages of that data? It's that start to get into the gray area and new territory for a lot of these enterprises that will require a lot of time for them to navigate going forward, and that's some of the conversation that we're having. So I would say it's more on the business side as opposed to the technical side of things.
Thanks. Next, let's move on to the trade-off between a few design parameters. We know there are multiple Oracle solutions to different methods, even for same type of operation. The major trade-off is between execution speed and accuracy. I'd like to hear your thoughts on how does Bandit protocol strike the balance between these two?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So I think Oracle problems is always going to be subjective problems, right? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is, it's almost always never going to be 100% accurate, right? Even if you and me talk right now and say, what's the price of Bitcoin? We're probably going to come up with a different figure, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's never going to be 100% accurate, but you just want it to be accurate enough, for the purpose of that usage, right? And in this case, liquidate position, mint tokens and whatnot, right? And so for this purpose, right, we need to decide that we want to prioritize speed while ensure that, of course, that we need to have good enough securities, accuracies through this token economic design, right? Such that any Oracle providers or validators on our network need to have sufficient collateral in the form of band tokens, right? In order to make sure they will not collude and stay honest. And I think that's probably the biggest part that we also differentiate ourselves to other solutions. As we are the proof of stake blockchain, we have probably right now over $500 million of band being bonded to the blockchain itself, right? And we also use randomizers to select validators, in order to report any single data, right? And that means, in order to collude and collect, actually manipulate the data, you probably need over 70% of the entire network, right? And that means you risk losing, over $300 million, right? In order to manipulate single data. And that's actually quite hefty compared to, potential benefit that they will get, right? And the cost that they will incur. So, that's the way we try to ensure accuracies. Of course, it's not going to be 100%, right? But it's almost always good enough for our purpose. And so far, we have been operating without any issues so far. So it's good. And hopefully that way.
Yeah. Also, do you see any difference in different DeFi areas? Do you have remove the balance a little bit towards a particular area, like say for trading? Mostly, I think Oracle's mostly for trading related activities. Like in other areas, do you see any difference? In some areas, there will be more emphasis on accuracy. Probably other areas will be emphasis on particular areas, less than on speed and more on accuracy. Whereas in other areas, will be more on speed, less on accuracy. Do you see any variation in different scenarios?
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think this really like you mentioned, right? Depend on the application, right? If you talk about borrowing and lending solution, that's mostly you probably want it as accurate as within 2-3%, right? But for other purpose, like let's say you want to mint or redeem synthetic tokens, right? That pegged to a particular price, so let's say a stock, like Apple stock, right? Then you would probably need it to be as close as 100% as much as possible, without the ability to get fund run, right, by other people. Because if that's not 100% accurate, people would just arbitrage and protocol risk losing money, right? So we see, there's quite different use cases that require different accuracies. Now with BAN, we decide our protocol to be actually quite flexible. And what I mean by flexible is that when you request the data on BAN chain, you actually write a script, right? Like we call it Oracle script, that specify what data you want, what's the frequency that you want, how many validators do you want, right? And you can specify conditions such as, hey, if these validators reply with different data that deviate more than 0.5%, then reject it, right? So you can customize all these security parameters to fit your need. So in the case where the minting and redeeming of synthetic tokens, like Mirror, for example, that means we will require more validators. Will require also that a lot of these updates happen much more frequently, and that also happen first in the block, for example, so that people don't front run it, right? And this is much easier to coordinate to do because again Terra and us are Cosmos based. This become much more difficult on an Ethereum based DeFi, right? But again, I think the point is, we need to be able to customize the security parameters to meet the different demand.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Next, I would like to discuss MEV, like minor extractable value, with you. We see that MEV has become a big business in the space, with most DeFi operations relying on price oracles, and the competition has become increasingly complicated. Also, we observe that liquidators are starting to monitor the main pool for Oracle updates rather than waiting for like the published price data. So how do you see the roles of an Oracle like Bandit Protocol in changing the future in response to MEV?
Right. So as actually, yeah, that's a good transition. I think, the Oracle front running is always an issue, right? Basically, what that means is, once people see that, an Oracle update transaction is entering the mempool, there will be bots that try to front run or even back run the update transaction, right? Because there will be ways to liquidate or arbitrage opportunities across. And I think it is worth noting that this problem actually lie with the application layers or the actual users, right? Not the Oracle providers, right? The way the miners or extract value, or the bot extract value here, is that it extract value from the users, whether they make the trade, whether they make the liquidation, right? And so it's actually lie with the application layers. Now, however, of course, we do care about end users and application that work with us. And we actually have begun some conversation with some of the solution providers right now to solve this. Basically, we need to find ways to guarantee that we, as an Oracle update, right, go first or in a particular order in a Ethereum block space or any particular blockchain block space, right? If we can find a way to sort of guarantee the placement of our Oracle update within a single block, then that will basically help to eliminate some of these MEV issues with the application, right? But it's not an easy problem, and we need to work with the application that uses us and our data, because again, at the end of the day, it's going to be the users that directly benefit from this. And we actually just have a task force that will go after this. It's going to be one of the most interesting and experimental area going forward for sure. The fight for the block space and the MEV issues, yeah. But it's interesting, yeah.
Sure. Thanks. We have a few minutes left, so I have some my final question for you is regarding the regulation. Probably we're seeing more regulation actions by law enforcement in the CeFi space. Like recently, a few cases you guys might have read from news. In the DeFi space, do you see the potential for regulators to kick in? For what I can think of, like say for Oracle, data related matters like privacy or sensitive data. Do you have any like measures to make sure the data sources are make them less sensitive and more regularly compliant? And what would be like some measures for you guys to like better prepare yourselves in front of the likely or possibly actions from regulators?
Right. So I think we work, I think we have 40 seconds left. We work quite closely with the regulators in across different countries, right? I think that the answer to your first part is yes, for sure, there will be more regulation coming. That's why we see BlockFi is entering the regulation debate with a lot of these US attorneys, right? And we're going to see more of that. I think it's actually helpful in the long run for the industry to have more clarity. And we actually welcome the work with regulators. As for us at BAN, we are much less sensitive because we don't deal with customer fund directly. But yeah, we do work with them, and we also plan to. I think one of the main goal in the next few months is to decentralize BAN more and make sure that this is going to survive whatever it comes, right? Whether that's regulation or future use cases. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the sharing, and thank you very much for your attention. That brings us to the end of this session. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.